The wind howled across the frozen expanse of the Siberian tundra, carrying with it shards of ice and snow that bit into the landscape like a pack of hungry wolves. Above, the steel-gray sky churned, heavy with impending storms. It was a desolate, unforgiving place, far removed from the warmth and chaos of civilization. But on this day, something extraordinary broke the monotony of ice and wind. A brilliant streak of light tore across the heavens, a blazing comet of silver and blue that illuminated the horizon. It wasn't a meteor, as some might have thought, but an alien vessel spiraling out of control. The craft's hull, sleek and shimmering with an otherworldly light, groaned under the strain of re-entry. Inside, Adrixa, the ship's lone occupant, struggled to maintain control. Adrixa's silver skin glinted in the emergency lights of the cockpit, her hands darting over alien controls as she fought to stabilize the ship. Her breathing was labored, her dual-lobed heart pounding in her chest. The asteroid belt she had passed through earlier had damaged her navigation systems, leaving her helpless as the planet's gravity pulled her down. She glanced at the screens in front of her, each displaying a cacophony of warnings in her native script. Her homeworld, Elenira, was a paradise of bioluminescent seas and towering crystal spires. It was a place of harmony, far removed from the chaos of this strange new world. The thought of it gave her strength, even as her ship shuddered violently. She tightened her grip on the controls, her large, luminous eyes scanning for any sign of a safe landing spot. The ground rushed up to meet her. There was no time to think, only to brace. The impact was deafening, metal screeching as the ship carved a jagged trench into the icy ground. Snow and debris exploded into the air, a plume of destruction visible for miles. When the dust settled, silence returned to the tundra. The ship lay broken, half buried in the snow, its once glorious form reduced to a smoking wreck. Inside, Adrixa stirred, her body aching from the crash. Her thermal suit, designed for the temperate climate of her homeworld, offered little protection against the biting cold. Her breath formed clouds in the freezing air as she forced herself to move, her movements sluggish and pained. She stumbled out of the wreckage, her silver skin shimmering faintly in the pale light. The world around her was a desolate wasteland of ice and snow, stretching endlessly in every direction. The temperature was plummeting rapidly, and her alien physiology, though resilient, was not built for this. Adrixa was utterly alone. Miles away, Daniel Reed was making his way back to his cabin, the snowmobile growling beneath him. A seasoned survivalist and former Arctic researcher, Daniel had made this remote corner of Siberia his home. The solitude suited him. The noise and chaos of the modern world had never felt right. Out here, he could breathe. His cabin, nestled in a valley between icy peaks, was his sanctuary. He had spent years perfecting its design, reinforced walls, a wood-burning stove, and enough supplies to last through the harshest winters. On this particular day, he was returning from a supply run, his sled loaded with canned goods and firewood. As he crested a ridge, he spotted something that made him stop. A plume of smoke curled against the gray horizon, stark against the white expanse. Daniel frowned. There shouldn't be anyone out here, not this far from the nearest settlement. Curiosity got the better of him. Adjusting his goggles, he turned the snowmobile toward the smoke. As he drew closer, the scene that unfolded before him was like something out of a dream or a nightmare. The alien craft lay in ruins, its sleek, otherworldly design unlike anything he had ever seen. The snow around it was scorched and littered with debris, the air thick with the scent of burned metal. Then he saw her. She was barely standing, her figure slender and delicate, her skin shimmering like liquid silver. Her movements were unsteady, her body clearly not suited to the brutal cold. Daniel's first instinct was to help, though he had no idea what or who she was. "Hey," he called out, his voice muffled by the wind. The figure turned, her large, luminous eyes locking onto him. For a moment, there was silence, an unspoken exchange between two beings from worlds apart. Then she took a step toward him, her legs buckling under her weight. Daniel rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. She was light, almost unnaturally so, her skin cool to the touch. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't understand, her voice weak and melodic. "You're freezing," he said, though he doubted she could understand him. "I need to get you out of here." She nodded faintly, her head resting against his chest. Daniel wasted no time. He wrapped her in a thick blanket from his snowmobile and secured her on the back before heading to his cabin. The journey was slow, the icy terrain treacherous, but he pushed on, the weight of his mysterious passenger a constant reminder of the urgency of the situation. When they reached the cabin, Daniel carried her inside, setting her gently near the fire. The warmth of the room began to seep into her body, her shivering slowing as she huddled in the blanket. Daniel fetched a thermos of hot tea, pouring a cup and offering it to her. She accepted it hesitantly, her hands trembling as she mimicked his actions. The liquid seemed to revive her, a faint flush returning to her silver skin. She looked at him, her luminous eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. Daniel couldn't help but marvel at her. She was unlike anything he had ever imagined, her presence both alien and strangely human. "You're safe now," he said softly, though he knew she wouldn't understand. She tilted her head, as if trying to decipher his words. Then she smiled, a small, hesitant gesture that needed no translation. Over the days that followed, they began to communicate, though their languages were incomprehensible to each other. Adrixa, as Daniel began to think of her, showed him a holographic projection from a device salvaged from her wrecked ship. The images depicted her homeworld, a place of breathtaking beauty, with floating spires and glowing seas. Daniel listened intently, nodding as she gestured toward the stars. He realized she was trying to explain her situation, that she needed help repairing a device, likely a distress beacon. The crash had left the beacon in pieces, its delicate components scattered and damaged. Adrixa worked tirelessly to salvage what she could, her movements growing more confident as her strength returned. Daniel offered his help, rummaging through his tools and supplies for anything that might be useful. Together, they worked to repair the device. Though their methods were vastly different, their shared determination bridged the gap. Adrixa guided him with gestures, and Daniel improvised with the materials at hand. As they worked, their bond deepened. They laughed when their makeshift repairs sparked unexpectedly and shared quiet moments by the fire when the day's efforts were done. Despite the odds, they became a team. The beacon was finally completed after weeks of effort. Adrixa activated it, a pulse of light shooting into the sky. She looked at Daniel, her expression a mixture of hope and sadness. He understood. This was goodbye. When the rescue ship arrived, a sleek, massive vessel descended from the heavens, its presence overwhelming. Adrixa's people had come for her. She turned to Daniel, her luminous eyes filled with gratitude. She placed a hand on his chest and spoke her first word in his language. "Friend." Daniel smiled, though his heart ached. "Yeah, friend." As the ship rose into the sky, Daniel watched it disappear, the tundra once again silent and still. Months later, under the shimmering auroras, a streak of light appeared in the sky. This time, it wasn't a crash. It was a message, a promise that their story wasn't over. For in the vastness of the universe, connections like theirs were rare, and some bonds could never be broken. The streak of light faded into the inky night, leaving Daniel standing in the snow, his breath forming soft clouds. He stared at the symbol glowing faintly on the snow before him. It wasn't just a random pattern, it was deliberate, etched with precision. The symbol resembled a starburst surrounded by arcs and smaller glyphs, faintly glowing in the pale blue hue he had come to associate with Adrixa's technology. He knelt beside it, brushing away some snow, his gloved fingers tracing the lines. He didn't know how he understood it, but the message was clear. She remembered him. She would return. For the first time in months, a genuine smile crept across his face. The days passed slowly after that, the tundra resuming its familiar rhythm of stillness and isolation. Yet, Daniel's heart carried a quiet anticipation. Every time he stepped outside, whether to chop wood or check his traps, he found himself scanning the sky. His thoughts often drifted back to Adrixa. Her luminous eyes, her hesitant smile, and the determination with which she had worked to repair the beacon, they were imprinted in his memory. Her departure had left a void, but the symbol had rekindled hope. One cold, clear night, as the auroras painted the sky with vibrant hues of green and purple, Daniel heard it. A faint, rhythmic hum. At first, he thought it was the wind, but it grew louder, resonating through the air like a melody. He stepped outside, his boots crunching against the snow. The sound seemed to come from above. And then he saw it. A small craft descended, its sleek form glowing faintly against the dark sky. It was smaller than the massive rescue ship he had seen before, its design more intimate. It hovered for a moment before settling gently on the snow, its lights dimming. Daniel's heart raced as a section of the craft opened with a soft hiss. For a moment, there was only shadow. Then she emerged. Adrixa stepped out, her silver skin catching the light of the auroras. She wore a cloak that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal, and in her hands, she carried a small, glowing device. Her eyes found his, and she smiled, a smile filled with warmth and familiarity. Daniel couldn't stop the grin spreading across his face. "You came back." Adrixa tilted her head, her expression curious, as if trying to decipher his words. Then she held up the device, pressing a button. A soft hum emanated from it, and when she spoke, her voice was accompanied by a faint, mechanical echo. "I came back," she said, the words halting but clear. Daniel stared at her, astonished. "You learned our language?" Adrixa nodded slowly, her smile widening. "Not all, but enough." He laughed, a sound that echoed across the frozen landscape. "Enough is more than I expected." She gestured toward the cabin, her eyes shining with curiosity. "May go inside." "Of course." Daniel led her back toward the warmth of the cabin, his mind spinning with questions. Inside, the fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Adrixa removed her cloak, revealing a sleek suit that seemed to adjust to the ambient temperature. She sat near the fire, her luminous eyes scanning the room as if cataloging every detail. Daniel handed her a cup of tea, and she accepted it with a grateful nod. "Warm," she said, her voice still slightly mechanical but more fluid now. "Yeah," Daniel replied, sitting across from her. "It's good to see you again." "I didn't think I would." Adrixa looked at him, her expression softening. "I wanted to return. To thank you." And she hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "To learn more?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his smile fading slightly. "You've already given me plenty to think about. But why take the risk? Your people, are they okay with this?" She nodded. "I told them you saved me. They trust me. I wanted to see you again." The weight of her words hung between them, and for a moment, there was only the sound of the fire. "Then I guess I have a lot to show you," Daniel said finally. "Welcome back, Adrixa." In the weeks that followed, Adrixa became a part of Daniel's world. She learned quickly, her sharp mind absorbing everything from how to build a fire to the intricacies of Earth's strange weather patterns. In return, she shared snippets of her own world, a place of luminous beauty and advanced technology that seemed almost magical to Daniel. One evening, as they sat outside under the stars, Adrixa activated a small holographic device. A three-dimensional image of her homeworld appeared, spinning slowly in the air. Daniel watched, captivated, as she pointed out various landmarks, her voice soft but animated. "It's beautiful," he said, his eyes fixed on the glowing projection. Adrixa looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Different from here." But she paused, her gaze drifting to the snowy landscape around them. "This beautiful too?" Daniel chuckled. "I guess it has its charm." She smiled, her eyes meeting his. "It has you." His breath caught at her words, the sincerity in her voice, leaving him momentarily speechless. As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that Adrixa's visit wasn't just a fleeting return. She had brought supplies and tools far beyond anything Daniel had ever seen, and together, they began to transform the cabin and its surroundings. The small shelter became a hub of innovation, blending Daniel's rugged survivalist ingenuity with Adrixa's advanced technology. The wood-burning stove was replaced with a clean, efficient energy source. The windows, once fogged with frost, were reinforced with a transparent material that retained heat while allowing in light. In the evenings, they shared stories. Adrixa's halting earth language grew more fluent, and Daniel found himself enchanted by her tales of her people, their culture, and their philosophy of harmony with the universe. He, in turn, told her about his life, the challenges he had faced, the reasons he had chosen isolation, and the beauty he found in the simplicity of his existence. Through it all, their bond deepened. What had begun as a chance encounter in the icy wilderness grew into something far more profound, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. And as the auroras danced above them, painting the sky with vibrant colors, they both knew that their story was only beginning.